Well,
Okay.
thank you, my friend, for being with us. So this is our, we call the Encontros por acaso. It's a meeting by chance. I always say it's
Oh,
not
meeting by
exactly,
chance.
it's not exactly by chance because you just have scheduled that. So, you know, it's, we program it. But it's a pleasure to have you here. I know, remember I first met you last year in San Jose, right? So we
Yeah.
gave him that, Shamim gave me a class, teaching me a class of continuous testing. In fact, comparing, making the correlation between site reliability engineering and quality assurance. And,
Yeah.
you know, you see several similarities between the two of those methodologies. And so everything that tells us that quality is by design, not by accident, right?
Yep.
So, and also, it's interesting to see that I mean, to get quality we need in our software. So we need all those methodologies together. It's not they are you know, they are not isolated, right?
Yeah.
Okay, my
Hey,
friend.
your audience is mostly Latin American. So do they need translation support or
No,
they get it?
Yeah, sure. You get it.
Okay. All
No
right.
problem. You know, last week I made a conversation with a friend from Peru.
Oh.
So we made in something we call Portuñol, you know, Portuguese and Spanish together.
Yeah.
So we try to mix it up. I don't speak Spanish, and she doesn't speak Portuguese as well. So you just try it. It just work. But here we can do it in English, and most people that are watching they understand English.
Okay.
So let's start with that, my friend. So thank you very much. It's a pleasure for me. You know this. I know how experienced you are. It's a privilege to have this talk to you as I had personally. So maybe you can just start talking and your challenges you're facing today at Broadcom and how you ended up in Dallas.
Well, I moved to Dallas about 10 years ago. That's when I was at HP at that time, and we acquired Mercury Software, and I moved into HP Software in the professional services team. And obviously, I needed to travel, meet customers and everything. So I wanted to be someplace where it was easy to travel from, right? And also relatively warm, because before that I was in Detroit, Michigan, you know, freezing my butt in the cold. So I decided I want to go someplace that's relatively warmer. So I think Dallas suited me fine because it was an international hub. So it's very easy for me to travel to multiple locations in the US and of course around the world. So that's how I got into Dallas about 10 years ago. So since then, I mean, I've moved around. I've left HP and joined Cognizant for a little while. And then now with CA Technologies for the last 4 or 5 years, 4 years, matter of fact. You know, currently I'm in the role of CTO for our DevOps solutions.
And in fact, I mean, Broadcom is headquarters in San Jose, in California, right? So
yeah, we're headquartered in San Jose. Yep.
And how frequently you fly to San Francisco to California?
Well, I was flying fairly frequently. Not now. I mean, it's amazing. You know, Joe, I haven't flown in the last 2 months. I don't think I've ever had a break this long. So, you know, there are some positives around the COVID situation, you know. I can spend more time with family and be local. But yeah, I mean, previously I was flying almost every week to meet customers or other things. But yeah, I mean, I used to fly to San Jose fairly frequently.
And has home office working for you?
Actually, I would say by and large, yes, right? I mean, you know, all of a sudden I've noticed, João, that we have more meetings, right? When you're working from home, my calendar is full. But, you know, maybe some of those meetings are not as productive as if you could meet personally on site, because, you know, I do a lot of these big whiteboard workshops and everything, and it's kind of hard to do that virtually, right? So which means that, you know, you probably have to do a lot more meetings, you know, to get the same information out, right, that you could get much more easily if you could be on customer side. But I would say overall, you know, I would say we're about probably 90% productivity.
Good. Yeah, I think
not bad.
Most of people are saying that. And maybe your travels will change a little bit by now, right? So, yeah. Because you know, I think you can do differently.
Even if you open up, if you think about it, right, if our customers don't want us to go there, right, even if we want to, then there you go. Right. I mean, you know, Yeah.
But please do not cancel the travel. We're gonna invite you to come to some of our events here in Brazil. All right?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about your, where have this idea of an article comparing COVID-19 testing and software testing come from? That's very, very, very interesting.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of interesting too, because, as you listen to all these news stories about, COVID-19 and also read all these articles, right? You cannot come across a single conversation about COVID-19 where they don't talk about testing, right? Every time they talk about COVID, they also talk about, how, people are getting tested, how many people are getting infected and everything. So I started, listening and following and reading about, all the testing techniques and how the testing is going, particularly in the United States, right? And I began to realize, hey, there are so many, similarities, right, between what's going on from a COVID testing perspective and the classic software testing. And then also I began to realize there are so many things that they're not doing right. We've been doing software testing for the last, 50, 60 years, right? We understand the discipline completely. So I began to realize, okay, wow, I mean, there are so many similarities I see on one side, and then also so many, opportunities for them to do better. And also at the same time, what are the lessons that we can learn, from the COVID-19 situation and apply it for ourselves? So that's really, what drove that article, because I thought I need to put this thing down on paper because, I feel very passionate about it,
And do you have friends that are doctors? Have you talked to them about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have had friends who are doctors, who are like, scientists, biomedical engineers and everything, and they all feel the same way. I mean, there are lots and lots of missed opportunities, right, that we should have taken advantage of, particularly around this whole concept of the smart testing. It's not about just testing, because you can never test enough. It's about how you be smart about the testing, right? For example, in software testing, we have this concept of risk-based testing. We did not do that. I mean, I was reading just yesterday that 1/3 of all the fatalities, at least in the United States, are senior citizens, right? And the nursing homes. And we should have known that right away. And we should have isolated those communities and everything that surrounds them right up front, right? Because that's where we would find the fatalities are happening, right? So we didn't do that. Only now are we starting to look at the nursing homes and everything, but we missed that opportunity, for the last 3 or 4 months, right? And there are so many other things around how we missed opportunities around how we could have tested smarter and not just tested harder.
There is an interesting point you do, is that good testing is not easy and needs to be done early. You say you should have shift left, is that right?
Absolutely. I said we should have shifted left, right? Yeah, I mean, interestingly, Joe, I mean, as you mentioned, good testing is not easy in either discipline. I mean, we learned the hard way, right? That good testing is not easy with software. Even our governments are also realizing that good testing is not easy, but at the same time, it has to be done early. And also too, right? Even if you do it early, you have to provide fast feedback. Just like developers want fast feedback. If you do a test for COVID and if it takes a week to get back results, it's useless, because in 1 week we would have been infected, right? So it means that we need fast automated testing that gives you results quickly, right? Because otherwise it's not very useful. Yeah. And also too, I was reading that some of these new antibody tests give you 50% false positives. So in other words, if a testing is not accurate, it's no good. You're just wasting time and money, right? So I think a lot of the similar things that we see in software all apply very, very much to COVID-19 testing as well. It's amazing, isn't it?
And yeah, that's right. We're talking about prevention. You said prevention is easier and better than cure. I mean, how you compare this? Prevention, this testing.
Exactly, because I mean, if you think about it, right? I mean, testing is after the fact, right? So, and you can never test enough, right? And testing is expensive, it's difficult. So if we actually focus better on prevention, in other words, people don't get infected to begin with, or we don't inject bugs in the software to begin with, it's much better proposition, right? That is why I think this whole containment ideas around, okay, wear masks, right? Wash your hands frequently, keep the social distancing,
right?
And more importantly, also figure out who are the highest risk population, right? Who are likely to to have a much higher impact. It's like, not all defects are the same, right? Some defects are more severe than other defects in software. Same thing with human beings, right? Not all human beings are the same. Some people are more vulnerable than others. So those vulnerable people should take more precautions than normal people, right? I think the similarities are amazing. So I think those people have to take more care so that, they are not infected. And also too, right, people around them, they have to be more careful too, right? Because it's not just about us. We have to care about each other. Just like, one of the things I mentioned in the article, Joe, right? It's not just about testers. Developers and testers and product managers all have to work together as a team, right? So similarly here also, we have to work as a team. It's not just about me. I mean, for example, if I have family members who are old, or I know people in the community who are old, it's up to me now to be very, very careful around them, right? Because I have to protect them just as much as they're trying to protect me, right? So it's a community effort.
That's right. I just said, said there is a point you said it's not practical to test everyone or everything. Yeah. And and I like you use the word resilience. So do monitoring and build monitoring and immunity and resilience instead. So
yeah, absolutely. Like, I mean, just like in software, right? It's not possible to test everything in pre-production, or even if you could, it'd be too expensive or too time-consuming. So what you do is, you take chances, right? You take risks, and then you monitor the software that you put out in production, and you try to monitor it very proactively and begin to understand the trends, and then sort of address the problems before they become critical. So same thing here, right? So obviously we can't test everybody. I mean, testing for COVID-19 is even more difficult than testing software, because your subjects under test are all over the place, right? So you have to, that's why, do better monitoring, so for example, contact tracing, understanding where people have been. For example, they have this nice program that Google and Apple have put together that does correlation between mobility and the number of infections, right? So if you can start to understand the mobility patterns and all those things, that's an example of monitoring and contact tracing. So you can actually find out the zone of influence, right? So if some person has been infected, who others are infected, and again, and then keep tracing that. And also too, right? I mean, for example, at Broadcom, every time you enter our office, you're taking the temperature, right? And now it's very easy in modern age for these thermometers to be connected to the internet. They're all smart IoT devices, right? So if you can do a heat map or temperature map or whatever it is, right? And you can do a track on the internet, you can do advanced analytics, you can get a much better picture of where exactly the hotspots are, and start to address those hotspots right away, right? I mean, I think this is an amazing, again, similitude, right? So you can start to understand the hotspots, understand the trends, and proactively address the problem before they become escalations.
Yeah, so you talked about respect and also hygiene. I mean, I've been in Japan and China before this pandemic. And in both countries, you see people using the masks, even, to protect each other, not to protect themselves. So these are kind of, you get used to respect people, right?
Oh, yeah.
So that's the same way now. We are just learning. You can learn from, I used to say in Brazil, you can learn from love or from pain. So, and you're learning from pain, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this was really a really painful experience for us. So real question again, Joe, is what's going to happen when we get the next endemic or next epidemic or whatever it is, right? Will we be better prepared or not? And I really hope so, because I think there are so many lessons to be learned from this exercise. I'm hoping that our health management organizations are understanding and recording these lessons, and hopefully, just like we learn in software, they will also learn and apply those lessons, right?
And Shamim, there is a friend of mine, Marcio Castro, is asking if you see automation testing tools melting with RPA tools and BPM.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So if you think about it, right? I mean, in the test automation from a software perspective, RPA automation obviously plays a big role in GUI testing, right? Because it's about the interface, and as you know, GUI testing is very difficult in software because it's very brittle, it's difficult to maintain and everything. So if we have some kind of techniques like RPA that make it easy for us to record those tests, and more importantly, dynamically refresh those tests as the interface changes, I think it has a big role to play, because that is a big challenge from a software perspective. Now, if I were to draw the analogy to COVID-19 testing, right? Obviously, automation testing is very important, right? So if you think about the original tests that were taking 1 week to complete, but now you can get the test results back in maybe a couple of hours or even minutes, right? But at the same time, you have to be accurate, because a fast test is no good if the test is not accurate, right? So we have to do both, right? We have to get fast testing, but we also have to have very high accuracy. Yeah.
And you see, I know how we could correlate. I don't know how, but correlate chaos engineering and with COVID.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe that would just bring chaos. I'm not sure. What do you think?
Yeah, and this is part of the whole resiliency thing you talked about, right? So chaos engineering from a software perspective is all about understanding, how your software is going to react based on some design, disruption patterns, right? So you introduce disruption and try to see how your software is going to react. And oftentimes you do this in a production or even pre-production environments, right? And the thing is, you don't tell your application development teams that you're going to do this, just so that, so that you can actually test to see how the software is going to behave in real world. Now, if you think about, on a COVID-19 situation, we exactly have the same thing because we are not in control, right? People are flying in from other countries, people are getting parties, mixing together. So this is almost like an uncontrolled situation. So the right way to do this is to introduce those chaos principles. So just like in software testing, we have to prepare for resiliency and design resiliency for upfront.
We cannot have chaos to use chaos engineering, right?
Exactly. You have to have discipline to address chaos. In other words, you have to have a disciplined health management system or software testing system, whatever it is, right? So that, you can actually deal with chaos because you can never be totally in control, right? So that's why you have to have a very robust system, that can deal with whatever contingencies that arise, right? So I think the similarities are very stark in both the cases.
Yes, for you to use chaos engineering, the shift right, we should have been working very hard in the shift left.
Yeah.
So it's Netflix use a lot the chaos engineering shift right, and LinkedIn they use shift left. They build resilience. In fact, maybe they both converge. Once you have this very strong shift to left, we can easily make tests in production. This I learned from you, in fact, right? So just repeating.
Thank you.
Okay, how is he? Coming back, there is a question here from my friend Jose Eduardo. He's asking, are there any plans to use digital twins in automation testing?
Why not? If you think about it, and I'm assuming this is the context of software testing, right? So we already, if you think about, in many cases, we already use this concept of digital twins. If you think about the virtual user concept, right? In load testing, a virtual user is not a real user, right? It's an abstraction of a real user, right? That we use to simulate a generate a load, right? So these concepts are not new. We already are, for example, simulating, when we do load testing through what we call the digital twins, right? Which is, simulating real user behavior through virtual avatars, so to speak, right? And the same thing, with other things, for example, we do use digital data virtualization or service virtualization, all of these, or even network virtualization, right? We're all simulating. But I think the real question is, for example, when we get to these new cyber physical systems, that, as we build out more of our digital transformation and we build more and more of these cyber physical systems, for example, think about like a smart device that is, either on your body or embedded in your system, like a pacemaker, right? Which is also an IoT device, right? Now, how do you test, for example, rollout of a new software into these devices? You just can't, line up all the people who have the device, and then, you really have to start to think about, well, how do I, create a digital twin of that system, right? And simulate that endpoint where I can do my software deployments and see how the system is going to react, right? So I think we're going to see more and more of that, right? As we get to more and more IoT type systems, we're going to see more of the digital twin, not just from the system perspective, but also from the human recipient perspective, right? So it's going to be a very interesting combination of digital avatars that sort of will play together. So I think what we're going to see now is today, for example, where we do use these digital avatars, they typically interact with the endpoint, right? They don't typically interact with each other, right? But I think we're going to see now more of digital twins interacting with each other, right? To create a total ecosystem of digital avatars, right? That we're going to have to deal with. So I think it's a very interesting problem that we're talking about.
Yeah, no, the decisions, when you have live data, decision has to be taken by some machine learning and artificial intelligence, right?
Oh, yeah.
So there is a question here is how you think artificial intelligence and machine learning are working together to DevOps to extend the capabilities of software application resilience? This is from Thiago Oliveira. And is that related to no ops?
I don't know if it's related to ops or not. So the first part of the question obviously is how we're using machine learning and AI to better improve resilience. And I think, the answer lies in a lot of the solutions we have for AI ops, right? Where we're using AI for mining all the operations data to understand, where things are going, understanding trends, and proactively addressing, hotspots before they become crises and all those kind of things. So I think those are very well-defined principles. Now, whether that is to do with no ops or not, I don't know. I mean, in my mind, Joao, right? I mean, AI ops is a function, whether we have SREs that are doing it and there's no operations team, or whether operations teams are doing it. I think it's mostly a cultural type question, right? Whether some teams like Google and everybody, they prefer the no ops approach because they have very empowered teams, right? And they're a technical software company. They can afford to have a large IT staff that can do all these kind of things. Engineers to do all this work. So they might have, operations team that are empowered with these technologies to do the same kind of thing. It's just a question of, how organizations are set up. It's mostly an organizational cultural issue as opposed to, right, whether we have ops or no ops, right? I mean, the work still is there. It's just a question of who does it. Yeah.
Right. So just completing this question. So why do you think DevOps is so obvious, but hearing for you, it's important. How do you think DevOps is so important today, and what you see in the main challenges to implement it?
Well, obviously, DevOps is very, very important today. I think if you think about, the time to market, right? That's a key driver behind a lot of the DevOps initiatives that our customers are taking, right? So I think for that reason, DevOps continues to be very, very important. And I think from a challenges perspective, Joe, I think, the key things that we're seeing now, we've always known that testing is a big bottleneck in DevOps, right? I mean, I was just reading the GitHub survey, and they said, the testing is now considered, a bottleneck by about 40% of all the DevOps people, compared to 60% it was last year. So it's good to see that testing is less of a bottleneck now than it was before. But what is now emerging, as the bottleneck, trending bottleneck, based on that survey that I'm seeing, is the deployment infrastructures are getting very, very complicated, right? Mm-hmm. So if you think about how core velocity and DevOps have been achieved, it has been achieved through deployment automation, right? And then once you got everything automated, then the new bottleneck becomes architecture, right? Because your architecture is monolithic, it's complicated, you can't deploy in small granular units, so you have to go through the microservices and other architectures. But now what we're seeing is, while the systems of engagement, which is the new age applications, are doing very well, the backend applications are still using old legacy architecture applications. They're becoming the sort of the new bottleneck, and customers now have what we call hybrid pipelines, right? So when people talk about DevOps pipelines, Joao, they give you simple diagrams where they show you, microservices, one pipeline per microservice looks very easy and simple, right? But in real organizations, you have, complex hybrid pipelines that cross, all kinds of applications. You've got simple applications, complex applications, legacy applications, mainframe applications. They all have to be managed across a set of pipelines. So, coordinating work across all those pipelines is not easy. Everybody says, I want to be able to release and deploy independently of each other. That is much easier said than done, right? It's not easy. People have complex, architectures and complex dependencies between systems, and now trying to manage the dependency and all that complexity is the new challenge that we have in DevOps, as more and more non-unicorn customers want to do DevOps, and they have all these complicated systems that they're trying to bring to the whole DevOps pipeline. I think that is a big challenge, because it's, on one hand, you have got AWS, or on one hand, you call the native systems that are sitting in the data center that people haven't looked at in a long time from a re-architecture perspective. That's becoming the new bottleneck.
Well, Shamim, in your opinion, you think the role of testers, role of a tester, should really exist, or maybe the testing practice and the quality consciousness that really should be strengthened through architecture, development, requirements, and so on? How are you saying that? Because test is important, but tester, if you focus too much in the tester role, maybe you will leave test for the end of the development. How do you think about that?
No, you're right. I mean, testing as an activity is important, right? I mean, it has to be everybody's job, right? Everybody's got to be quality conscious. So that is not going away. Matter of fact, I see more and more testing happening as we start to accelerate the life cycle. Now, the interesting question is, what about testers, right? So with shift left and shift right of testing, obviously we see a lot of overlap with the job of the developer, with the job of the operations, with the job of SRE. We talked about SRE, right? So we see all these other roles playing a greater amount of effort in testing, right? So what does the tester do? Well, I think the tester will still be around. I mean, the whole concept of somebody looking at quality from a perspective of an outside in, right? From the perspective of the customer, as opposed to somebody who's building the system is very, very important, right? Having that independent, ability to verify and validate, look at it from a perspective of the customer is very, very important, because the developer is not a customer, the operations guy is not a customer, right? So I think the tester is still going to be very, very important. You still have to do what we call exploratory testing, right? Which is not scripted, which is not automated and everything. So maybe the tester's role is going to get a little bit more shrunk compared to what we have today, because the developers are going to do more testing, the SRE is going to do more testing, the operations guys are going to do more testing, but the tester's role is continue to be there. It'll be a little bit more different and more focused compared to what we see today, right?
Okay, so there is a question here. How could you have truly DevSecOps? I mean, do you think AI is the answer to have security by design?
No, you have to build in security as part of your whole DevOps lifecycle, right? Because oftentimes we think about security as operational security, right? How do I do access management, identity management, and so on and so forth, network management? But as we all know, the easiest access point is the app, right? And most of these recent hacks have shown that it's the application weakness that has led to the hack. So we really have to build in security consciousness, just like, security is a dimension of quality, just like you mentioned. Right. Quality consciousness throughout the whole life cycle, right? So which means that, number one, let's start with thinking of design. Let's talk about requirements. Are we capturing security requirements as part of our requirements? It's not just about functional requirements. Just like we started capturing performance requirements, you have to start thinking about, security threat models and build requirements around those threat models as part of our backlog, right? Number two, you're doing design. Are you doing design for security, right? Number three, you're coding. As you're coding, are you keeping security in mind? Are you testing for security? You're doing the static security testing, dynamic security testing, right? All of that stuff. Same thing with pen testing, right? So as you do integration testing, runtime testing, are you putting pen testing, like performance testing early in the life cycle, and so on and so forth, right? Also, too, we got to build in, right, the security concepts around configuration management. So, for example, in DevOps, we do configuration as code, right? So, I mean, we take configurations and describe it as code in Puppet and Chef and other recipes, right? But we never think about, is that configuration secure? I mean, are the right port numbers being opened? Are those port numbers coordinated across different applications? We're going to start thinking about that too. And luckily, we now actually have tools that can actually look at code, infrastructure as code, and flag, security problems, right? That are potentially exist in part of the infrastructure, right? So I think all of those things have to start happening and build it part of the pipeline, right? So that we truly have DevSecOps. But interestingly, Joe, this problem that you mentioned, right, around security testing early in the life cycle, as you know, the big problem with that is false positives, just like with COVID, right? You get 50% false positives or even higher. And software developers don't like that, right? I mean, they run all these tests and they get a lot of these false positives or these are just repeats of past issues. So we really have to introduce AI into the picture to really weed out some of these things, because what developers want is fast feedback on things they can action, right? Whole bunch of items that are coming up that are either false or just repeats of previous issues are no good, right? So we have to start using AI technology to really filter through all of those outputs and give very concise and precise information and give a true assessment of risk, right? Just like with any other defect. So security risk will have to go through the same process as other functional performance risks, right?
Good. There is a question here about your view on continuous testing.
Oh yeah, thoroughly. Continuous testing is very, very important, right? I mean, I think everything we've been discussing so far is in one way or other related to continuous testing. And let me actually relate this to COVID-19, right?
Yeah,
so
that's
in
right.
Software, continuous testing, we understand means you do completely throughout the life cycle. It's not a particular phase of the life cycle, right? It happens at every phase of the life cycle. Every time you create something, you have to make sure that it is tested and your software is ready for deployment at any point in time. That's the whole point about continuous testing. But think about what it means from COVID-19, right? Which means that just like in software, it's never one and done. You have to do it repeatedly, right? Just because you tested negative today, you could actually test positive tomorrow, right? So particularly if you think about a high-risk situation, let's say you're a healthcare worker in a nursing home taking care of senior citizens, right? It's not just enough that you test one day. You have to test every day. That gives a new concept to the meaning of continuous testing, because you have to be absolutely sure that you're introducing no risk in a high-risk situation, right? For example, we heard that in the White House, in our president, everybody gets tested every day, right? Why? Because they consider that a high-risk situation. So similarly, this continuous testing means that you're going to keep doing over and over and over again just to make sure that that you are not regressing on your quality at any point in time. So obviously, it's not possible to do in COVID-19 situation, testing everybody every day, right? In all circumstances. But I think that's the reason why we have to do smart testing to understand where the risk is and then accordingly tweak the testing up and down depending on the risk, right?
Okay, my friend, talking to you, time goes by fast. And just run out of time. If to have all those people watching us, I'm just saying, this interesting Shamim article is highlighted in my LinkedIn. If some of you want to read it, it's very, very interesting. It's very detailed. And also, Shamim is already in LinkedIn and also in Instagram. So LinkedIn is Shamim Ahmed. That's yes. Right, Shamim. So it's easy to connect. I highly recommend. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm trying to recommend you to White House, because you could really help them with this, your methodology to test COVID-19, right?
Thank you.
I'm going to do that. Shamim, it was a great pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much. It's not just in 30 minutes, just it's time. Enough to say hi to everybody and to at least to show your your experience. And I hope we can meet during, last of the year, maybe by the end of this year, so we can talk personally.
Yeah, we love to, yes.
Well, somebody is here just marginally saying, no, not perhaps Shamim could help Alvorada. Alvorada is our president's house.
Oh,
in Brazil. Maybe you can help in Brazil. That's his saying here.
Maybe ask him to read the white paper I wrote, and maybe he'll get some ideas from there.
Thank you very much. I'm going to switch this to Portuguese just to say goodbye to everybody, but I'd like to thank you and let's keep in touch.
Thank you very much.
Pessoal, obrigado aí de novo aí. Semana que vem o Shamim, super cara, conectem aí no LinkedIn com ele, porque vale muito a pena, é super acessível e vai responder, ele tem muita experiência. E eu queria, semana que vem aqui, nesse mesmo bate-canal, bate-horário, eu vou estar com o Marcelo Kavik, que é um amigo, ele mora na Estônia, direto de Tallinn, ele vai estar falando conosco aqui sobre a sociedade digital, sobre governo digital na Estônia. Just telling them, Shamim, that next week we're going to have Marcelo Kavik, he's a Brazilian that lives in Estonia. He's going to be talking to us about this digital society. Estonia is one of the most advanced digital societies in the world. So he's going to talk, he's going to tell us how they, how they have the privilege to pass this pandemic in a digital society. So very interesting. Thank you. Pessoal, para quem não viu, nós vamos deixar gravado. Shamim, thank you very much. See you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Obrigado.
Obrigado.